read an excerpt from a story called The Torchbearer. Here we go. The Torchbearer. I remember dawdling behind my father and older brothers as we strode across the rocky highlands after our goats. My father periodically looking back to see how far I'd fallen behind, and then calling, "Yulin, try to keep up." I was the youngest of 3 brothers and 1 sister, a runt. The land, my father reminded me, does not tolerate a weak body and docile spirit. The land was gloom incarnate, watching our goats feed, taunting them to escape our bristle wooden fences and run out to the open horizons over the mossy cracked rock. And we followed, hunting after them to the borders of our property, marked by flat rocks stacked 5 high. Usually it was a nude dam, and we'd find her by a pond or rock enclave, freshened with a kid. Bucklings and doelings would wander off from the others, and we'd find them huddled together or alone, shaking against rocks. The hut where my family lived, made of wood my father carted over 80 miles to bring here, before any of us were born, had dirt floors covered with straw, a room for my parents, my sister, and a room that I and my brothers shared. The hut was further east from the highlands, so this region bore a stiff grass of sickly yellow, small browses and thorn weeds that when making contact with skin left abrasions. North of the hut was a series of round-topped mounds where the grass grew and goats fed. The land itself was like a dried goat carcass, hair standing on end, our hut a pockmark. From the north, rising above the mounds, there amassed an ever-present horde of black clouds. At rare times during the winter, the 3 winds that converged here blew in the same direction, bringing with it the black clouds, blotting out the sky and making the days dark and the nights starless. They hung there in the north, and at times above us, threatening rain but never producing a single drop. Near dusk, when the goats had been brought in from feeding and drinking from the sunken pond, I'd catch my father leaning upon his walking stick, looking north to that storm that never stormed. 4 times a year, my family left the hut, leaving my next oldest brother, Thomas, and I to look after the herd and our property. They'd cross to the north, heading for the black clouds and the city that resided under them, a city that went nameless. My father did not allow us to speak of it, and when we did, it was only in preparation for that journey. I guessed that it was a place my father and mother came from, crossing the northern flat with goats and a cart of lumber to a land that bore no crops. I longed to go with them, but I was never allowed to. When they left, they would not return for 2 weeks. They'd take 2 or 3 yearlings with them, a buck or doe for mutton, and an old wood cart my father pulled. They'd trade the goat milk, the leather, hair, yearlings, and mutton for lumber, straw, and other items of need. A few years before this time, my father brought back a large piece of glass, the first I ever saw, and with my oldest brother made a window near the front door. The view was of the mounds and the northern clouds, so we could watch the goats feed. Outside the hut, on a tall, dark pillar rising above the roof, was a large lamp that my father, and my father only, lit at night. Travelers called these lamps midnight beacons, and would use them as markers or stride toward them for lodging or help. Very rarely would someone knock at the door. Even rarer would I see the tiny specks of travelers' torches heading for the northern flat and the city beneath the clouds. Travelers forced to cross this place called it the Sad Lands and avoided it if they could, the widely dispersed people dwelling here, coming to us only for help. Neighbors occasionally came, but my father met them at a distance and sometimes traded and other times went with them and would be gone for a day or 2. It was a plain day with stripes of fog hanging in the air as dusk neared. My father gestured to me and taking my hand led me to the emptied mounds. We looked back upon the hut, and my brothers clicking their sticks, guiding the goats back to their confinement behind our home. We will go soon. Thomas is now old enough to come. You are now old enough to stay here. I stood there looking at the brittle grass and small browses, attempting to contain my red eyes and hot heart, but failing, I began to cry. He sighed and said, "This is a big step. I know, but we all must do it." "I should be going," I wiped my face. "No, you should not be." The next day my father led me to the lamp, undid its chain, and brought it down slowly. "Yulin, you must not light the lamp, for any reason. If anyone comes, offer them water from the pond, but do not let them in. Let no one know you're alone. On the last day of the second week, we will return during the night. Light the lamp on that night, and only that night. For if there's fog or clouds, there'll be no stars, and we'll not be able to find our way back." I nodded. It was nearing spring when my family was to go. Truffles sprouted in the highlands, and my mother even found them around the hut. She boiled them with the brittle grass and a goat's head, and told me to ration it best I could in their absence. There were many new dames to keep track of, and yearlings to discipline. I said nothing to my family as they gathered belongings into the cart, tying the goats by rope. Each one of them said goodbye and hugged me, though I did not hug back. My mother and sister climbed in, and as they pulled away, my mother looked back, but not at me. She was looking upward to the sky, a sad smile on her face, and I realized now she was a woman married to the sky, married to that place. There was a place so in her that crossing the flat was like parting from a lover. And so I was left alone. In the mornings, I'd wake before light and drink goat's milk and strike the fire to heat water. I'd drop the dried mutton in the water and boil it, puffing it and eating it with milk. I'd take my walking stick and go out among the sleeping goats, counting them and recounting them. When it was time, I rang the bell, waking them, and then leading them to the mounds to begin the day. During the first week, I lost only one goat, a buckling, whose budding horns had already scurred. I kept the herd at the mounds until midday, and then put them to confinement. I took the dried mutton and water pouch and tracked the bucklings south into the highlands. The highlands, beginning when the land turns from browses and brittle grass to rock and moss, rolled to the horizon with enclaves and inlets and hidden sunken ponds. There was no more of the sand-infused clay, nor the mound-like hills. In the rocks I saw the bones of strange creatures. Later, I learned that all of this had been a dried ocean, a dead sea long ago drained. The fog came from the highlands, and at times reached the hut. It lurked to unheard music that it played for non-human ears, lurking like ghost breath just above the land, as if from another time of old, come back for the quiet and sulfur smells, rising from a sea beneath the rock, a lost voice revealing itself in the form of fog. It was easy to lose oneself in that place, especially when the horizon grew a blur and a haze thickened the air so you could taste it on your lips. The fog was soon to follow, and it was then I found the buckling huddled near a rock. It took the rest of the day to find and return. So by the time I sat at the table with soup, I felt myself falling to sleep. I spooned a hardened eyeball, sucked the flavorful fat from around it, then put out the fire and went to sleep. Thanks.